advice or recommendations are coming from. And because I'm not a parent, so it's important to understand that I don't know what it feels like. I can go with from the other side and what I recommend from maybe stepping back and not having that bias. So I have had the opportunity to work with, and most of the people I work with are above the age of 14. So they're typically, for the most part, most of the people I've worked with are AAA level or high level above the age of 14. So that being said, I've had plenty of conversations with parents of kids that are younger than that. And I think, so I grew up, hockey was my main sport. I was on skates at 18 months. I could skate no problem by the age of 2. So hockey was kind of my thing. But I played competitively, baseball, soccer, football. I played lacrosse in university and college. And so I continue to play hockey, and I love it. I realized myself probably at the age of like 15, I probably wasn't going to be a pro. And I was okay with that to a certain degree, hence why I'm a trainer of people. So, that old adage of those who do and those who can't teach. And so I'm the one that tries to teach. But no, I think first of all, like, I don't even know where to start on this. Realistically, I think people need to understand why they're putting their kids in sports to begin with. So especially when the kids are young, it's just fun, movement, exercise, and social. Like, to me, that has to be the main reason for your kids to start. And if you understand that principle, I don't think that should go anywhere. I talk to a lot. I find the GTA is crazy for hockey, especially. I assume, I don't doubt that that football and soccer are not far off, but hockey I know is crazy. I grew up in Montreal where, there was a little bit of that, like that pressure or that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Essentially, like, I think there's like a lot of the hype around it, but here I've never seen anything once I moved here and started to learn about it, I'm like, holy cow. I talk to parents of kids that are 9 years old, and the parent wants them to play on a different team. Their league won't give them a release, so they move. They sell their house and move so that their 8-year-old could play in a different league. I'm like, what? And they explain, they're like, well, the development in different, depending where you live, if you're in the GTHL, like, the caliber is way higher, so their development's going to get bigger. And I think to me, it blows my mind. That being said, I get it, because you ask a good question. You're like, am I doing everything for my kid to succeed? And am I giving them enough opportunity if they want to do that? So I think it can go in both directions, in my opinion. I think, if you want them to be good, first of all, let's talk about some of the best athletes I've seen. So if you look at some of the best hockey players.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but do you want to let everyone know, who you worked under, who you were mentored by,
Sure,
and how, you got to where you are, and
sure,
why you
absolutely.
have the experience or the position that you're in right now? Because
Yeah,
I didn't want
to
say, just because I didn't want to bastardize your skills that you have available to these people.
Sure. So I had an opportunity to work under a guy named Andy O'Brien. He was kind of like my tipping point and kind of my accelerator for this knowledge. He's the director of sports science and performance for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He has a private company in Toronto. So I worked with him for 4 years. So we had about 25 pros that we dealt with. Anyone, we were lucky enough to deal with guys that, so Andy's best known for being Crosby's trainer for the last 16, 17 years. And so Andy's repertoire or slew of people that he's worked with are some of the best in the NHL. So we have the Jeff Skinners, Jason Spezza's, John Tavares. These guys were all the guys I got to interact with and learn from and be around and help them in their development, which was great. And then that gave me an opportunity to kind of build my knowledge. So I'm learning from the best, both from the athlete perspective as well as the coach perspective. And that gave me an opportunity to kind of filter it accordingly to younger athletes. So I helped Andy build his youth program. And we worked with mostly kids that were minimum 13 years old. Even that was pushing it. I preferred 14 or 15. And so that's kind of like, those are the type of people that I learned a lot from. I still work with some elite level, both youth and NHL. So it's interesting, and hearing their perspective, because sometimes because I worked with a lot of youth athletes, I would ask the pros what they think. And it was interesting to hear, like, you get the parents who are, I always thought of parents as being older than me, but I'm like, well, parents are pretty much our age. So, and I'm exposed, and I think of like, okay, what are they exposed? What information are they getting? And a lot of it is media. So you get campaigns from different brands like Bauer and Nike and Adidas and whatever. And it's just like, go hard. Like, no, the harder you work, you're all set. And as long as you do that, you're fine. You'll make it. And I think the problem with that is that's all they think about. And there's no method to the madness. It's not like there's no brand campaigns or people posting like, hey, just go have fun. There's none of that. It's like, no, we're going to work really hard. And that's the only thing that matters. So I think parents are kind of like, okay, that's what, if I do that, if I get my kid to do that, like, they have a potential of being the next Sidney Crosby, Michael Jordan, whatever. So, and I think you look at it and they're just like, they're obsessed with competitiveness. I don't think that's a bad thing. There's a difference between working so hard all the time and being obsessed with being competitive. You got to understand, like, there's ways to work smarter and be more efficient to become successful. And I think people kind of get lost in the fact that, like, oh, no matter what I do, whether it's really productive work or not, as long as I work really hard, that's all that matters. It's like, well, yes and no. So going back to what I was saying before is, I think, some of the best hockey players, especially. So hockey is an interesting sport because it's not very similar to a lot of other sports as far as biomechanics go. A skating stride is quite different from a running stride. Hockey players don't need to jump vertically. There's none of that. Hockey is typically, in an ideal situation, is played on a single leg, sitting in a very low position. And that's where hockey lives. And it's a very, like, the motion covers all planes. So that being said, I find athletes who are hockey players that play other sports growing up. So especially lacrosse was always a big one for a lot of kids growing up. So they play hockey in the winter, lacrosse in the summer. You look at John Tavares, for example. He's one of the best NHL players in the world. He could have been one of the best, like his uncle, one of the best lacrosse players. So there is this transfer of learning to a certain degree, but I think just generally athleticism, I find a lot of hockey players that excel and make it look easy are also really good at one or two other sports. So I think, from my opinion, I grew up playing a ton of sports, different ones, and I never felt like I had to practice one over and over to be relatively good at it, to a certain degree, right? Like, I mean, I'm talking about, like, if we're talking from age 4 to 11, like, you can play a bunch of sports and you should be able to slowly pick things up. But I find you pick up skills that aren't necessarily specific to each, like, they don't cross over 100%, but you get skills of, like, learning how to work with different types of people in different scenarios. You get to envision plays developing. You get to learn how to move to adapt to something happening out when you're not the main focus of the play. Things along those lines. I think those are all valuable. So to me, I'm a huge advocate of multi-sport kids. Like, play as much as possible. Like, I think my mom's best advice, and as she said, give the kid a ball, and let them figure it out. Throw, catch, hand-eye, whatever. It's awesome. And then if you start to develop skills with an implement, hockey stick, lacrosse stick, whatever. So I'm a huge advocate of, especially the younger generation, like, playing a bunch of sports. I think that's great for a slew of reasons. If they start specializing really young, I know, like, the Tiger Woods of the world, where they start specializing at age 3 or 5 or whatever it was, like, everyone, people will take that and be like, oh, if I just do that, my kid's going to be the next Tiger Woods. Like, no, not necessarily. So make sure your kid has a fun childhood and enjoys it. Now, if your kid, to me, at the age of 12, 13, 14 is like, no, I really like this, and my goal is to be a pro. And it's the kid's decision, not the parents. It's the kid's decision that, hey, I want to pursue this. I like the idea of working really hard and being good at it. Okay, then I think it's your job to support that as the best that you possibly can. You don't want to to me, just follow the kid's interests. If they clearly don't like something, we'll stop pushing them. And if, I think from I work with a lot of clients that are parents of kids that play sports, and my recommendation is let them try a bunch and see which one they get drawn to, and go from there. Like I don't think you should overthink it just because maybe, you might be a bias of a hockey parent or a soccer parent or football parent. Like maybe you played and you expect that of your kid. It's like, well, I think you got to be careful with that and let the kid actually decide. My parents just said, hey, Jay, if you want to play something, we'll put you in as best we can. They're like, the second you don't like it, you just stop playing. And I was like, well, that seems to make sense. And I think some parents these days have gotten lost in that, and they almost like they're living the dream through their kids a little bit. And that can get a little bit dangerous in my opinion. But that's, again, I'm not a parent, so I can't feel it. I just go with what I see and how I grew up. So that's my perspective in general from what I think as far as picking and choosing time to pick a sport. I think I don't know. I think you just got to let the kid choose, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think there's a lot more data out there that supports the importance of, playing a variety of sports just for not developing imbalances, right? So if you've only played one sport, you're going to develop so many imbalances that when it's time to, and say like they wanted to play from 4 years old all the way up to 20 years old, and doing the same thing, the same motor pattern, they're going to end up having an opportunity to blow something out. And when it really matters for them to make it pro, they're going to lose their opportunity, because it's something that is more common than not that you see people, blow a knee or, pull their groin in playoffs, when they're like 16 years old, when, it's the time for them to, potentially get drafted to the OHL or whatever.
Yeah, I think
see
that's
you see it a lot, right?
That's an awesome point. I think every sport has, or any activity really, is repetitive in some nature. As dynamic as hockey is, as dynamic as soccer is, you can still categorize most of these sports into certain types of motions. So hockey, most injuries in hockey are, low abdominal groin area. So you talk anterior hip, high adductor, hernias, things along those are that's like the hockey injury, like the non-contact injuries for the most part. Soccer, it's going to be hamstrings for the most part. Football, I mean, most of those are going to be contact injuries, but the non-contacts are going to be knees, right? So, and even though they're very dynamic sports, and versus, let's say, like golf or something that's very one-off, the same motion, even tennis, for example, although it is dynamic, it's still very one-sided. So especially in those types of sports, you're going to develop some imbalances, no doubt, if that's all you do. So I think it's important to vary it up for not, even for that reason, I think is brilliant comment. So even when it comes to the training side, it's important to be aware of, okay, what are they doing so much? I think the common thought for trainers is, okay, you need to be really good at X motion. So if you're a baseball player, your swing has to be really good. So let's make that swing super powerful. It's like, yes, that makes sense, but you swing so many times. So maybe you want, from an injury prevention perspective, you want to maybe do some things that counter that motion to a certain degree. Not that they have to be able to swing, ambidextrous, but at the same time, it's like understand the mechanics that are taking place and make sure from an injury prevention perspective that they can move. For example, you take a baseball swing. Okay, let's say the batter hits left. Well, their hips are gonna rotate to get that job done, but their hips aren't moving the exact same in that left-handed swing. But then when they go to run, they need their hips to be symmetrical, right? So if they're just swing, and just get good at that, and then all of a sudden, they're imbalanced when they go to run, well, guess what's going to happen to their hips or knees or low back or something like that. So I think you make a really awesome point about about that, the idea of, or the concept of like overdoing it in particular biomechanical motions.
So that being said, there's a lot of, we deal with it, we train a lot of hockey teams at the Markham location, and we have, people who bring their kids for personal training, and their parents are like, okay, they play hockey. Again, it can be various sports, but, obviously it's, hockey is the more common one, but regardless, it's the same thing where they're like, we want you to get them good for that sport. So we want them to do sport specific training. What's your opinion on that? Or do you think like not worried about it till later? Because at the end of the day, again, I know our outlook is like, if you're like 10 years old and you want sport specific training, but you have zero foundation, right? In like a squat or just regular human movement, like it's so far along for us where we're like, we hear it all the time, even at high league, we see AAA kids and their movement patterns are still so off. It's just that they're so good at what they can do, but their foundation isn't even touched. So I'm like, I don't even know what level, and I'm sure you've even seen guys who play in the OHL or NHL, and they're still not even moving properly. And it's like, at what point do you think that they need this sport-specific training? Because I honestly, my opinion, in my experience, I'm like, I don't even see people getting to that point. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, unless maybe you're, at the NHL level, but I don't see enough people there that are at that level where I'm like, you need to be that specific, because I see so many foundational movements in little holes that I'm like, you're not balanced enough yet. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a sports specific training. I think, one, yes, you do need someone to have the capability and build the capacity on that capability for the needs of their day-to-day. So you train the majority of your members using the CrossFit method. Let's say there's a safe bank of movements there that allow people to kind of function on their day-to-day, what they need to do. They need, they sit, they stand, they pick stuff up. So you are training people you're essentially doing life-specific coaching, right? So if you look at a sport, sure. So let's put it this way. I think you're right. You're definitely right from, hey, if you can't squat on two legs, well, maybe we don't jump to one leg, right? If you can't walk if you can't walk properly, maybe let's not run. You know what I mean? So you have to, obviously it depends on the age development and training age of the person in front of you, or the group in front of you. But sure, I think there's a mix. I think there's opportunity for both, in my opinion. So hockey, you want to develop patterns that create. So I feel free to ask me about other sports. I'll just use hockey to start. And if we want to go into other sports, we can definitely dive into it. For example, let's take hockey. We know hockey should be played for the most part on one leg or the other at any given time. Anyone who's standing on both feet at the same time can't do much as far as a threat in that position. Your power from a takeoff won't work out well, unless you're standing in front of the net or like you're maybe skating backwards, you're going to have a little bit even pressure. But if you're skating or you're going to make a crossover, like you should be loaded on one leg. So I don't think there's an issue with slowly starting to develop those patterns and those a little bit of muscle memory for what that should look like. I think they need to get comfortable in that position if they're coming to you for a goal, and the goal is, hey, I want to be effective as a hockey player. So if we only train them on two legs and the goal is to stand up, so squats, let's say they're old enough to start, throwing in some cleans or box jumps. Think of the mechanics of those, right? Stand on two legs and the goal is to get tall. The last thing you want to do when you play hockey is stand on two legs and get tall. You want to sit low and be on one leg. So I think there's room for both. If they're young and they don't have those foundational movements, yes, I think they need to achieve those. But I think they can be achieved in conjunction with the capabilities needed for their sport. For example, being able to take a slap shot. If they only train in what we call the sagittal plane, forwards, backwards, up, down, they can't rotate where they need to be able to rotate in order to be effective in that motion. So I think there has to be some addition to capacity to allow them to be able to do that, because they are coming to see you for their sport. So to me, sport specific is, okay, what do you need to be able to do to be effective in your game? Can you do it? Yes or no? If you can't, well, let's build it. And that building process might start with your foundational motions and then, carry into specific. And if they can do it, then you just reinforce their ability to do so. And so their ability goes up, then you bring up their capability within that capacity, essentially. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. When you hear, like, what's your take on people training? Like when they say sports specific, I see, some people posting on social media, and like some people ask, like they love seeing where like they're like hopping on one leg and then stick handling, or on balancing boards, stick handling. Like, what's your opinion on
Yeah.
doing that kind of stuff?
So I think
That's
what really needs
specific.
to be understood is if something isn't challenging anymore, you have to make it harder in order to create change, right? You need this stimulus. So you want to get a better deadlift. Well, if you continuously deadlift 95 pounds forever, you're not going to be great at deadlifting any more than that. So if someone can stand on one leg, sit low, let's say, into this perfect kind of single leg sit position with a neutral spine, being able to hold all these mechanics that we want, and that's easy for them. They can hold it there for 2-3 minutes. Like, okay, well, that's no longer hard for them. But how do we now challenge that same? So now let's look at, okay, while holding that single leg, can they rotate their trunk? Well, let's challenge them on that. So now can the leg they're bouncing on stay nice and still while they move their trunk? So we create this dissociation. If that becomes easy, okay, let's load it maybe in like a med ball throw. Can they still hold that ability? And then you just have to keep challenging. So I think what people get caught up with, and I caution people on this a lot, is like people love the fancy stuff. So, stand on a Bosu, single leg and stick handle. But if they're like knees caving in and like they're all over the map and their spine's all over the mat, and they don't really have true control, then I think you're going backwards in your development. I think you need to there's a stepping stones here. Like, I think it's up to the coach to be like, hey, these are the KPIs, key performance indicators. So for example, you teach a squat. I need your knees to stay in line with your feet. Okay. Otherwise your hips, your knees, and your low back can be compromised. I need your knees to stay in line. Okay. If you're teaching a hockey player and you're talking about that single leg sit and can they hold that position, I need your knee to stay in line with your foot with a neutral spine. If you can't do that, then we're not advancing to anything fancier. And I think that's our job as coaches to explain, like, this has to happen before we go anywhere else. Otherwise, injury is going to happen and you're not going to get the stimulus we're looking for, even though it looks cool. So the sport specific side is a buzzword that people love. And I think people skip a lot of steps. So back to your point, building foundation to me is number one. But at the same time, I think we need to understand the demands of the activity and address those at the same time as building primal movements.
I think you described that really well, where I know a lot of coaches like to do like the cool thing and stop, like don't do any, like I feel like you said it perfectly, we're perfectly blending both in to, both positively help each other. So this way you're, building the foundations and adding skill at the same time for that specific sport, where I find a lot of people like the buzzword, and to impress, they kind of lose the foundational stuff, where they're like, let me just skip all the steps and put one leg up, close your eyes, and stick handle because it's going to look cool. Yeah. Because you're holding a hockey stick. It must be sport specific, but meanwhile, like you said, like your body, the engagement of what you're trying to achieve is not happening. So you're actually probably doing a disservice, right? And I think it's important for parents to know that, because I know there's pressures that coaches get. We're like, well, I want the kids' money or the parents' money, so I'm going to make them do that sport specific because that's what they want to see and that's what they want to hear. I'm going to give it to them, but they're doing the kids a disservice. And I think it's important to remember as a coach or as a parent that it's a blend of both, right? And everything will happen, as your body adapts.
I think that's a great point. Like, I think a lot of my time working with elite youth is actually educating the parents, should they want. Now, sometimes you get the dream parent that's like, hey, I'm hiring you. I trust you. I got a good referral. I trust whatever process you have is good. That doesn't always happen. You get the parents that, poke their head in and, give their 2 cents and things like that. The way I operate is, unless it's like the first session, I don't let the parents in. Like, sorry, it's, again, working with kids that are, 13, 14 or older, if they're younger than that, okay, obviously you potentially want the parents in, but my point is like, they're trusting in you. So any coaches out there, like, make sure you have a reason for what your prescription, as far as exercise and conditioning and stuff like that. And if you have a reason, then no one can really refute that. The best one I get is like, oh, I saw Connor McDavid posted this video and like, I want to do that. It's like, okay. He's been doing this for a long time. I guarantee he didn't start with that. So there's definitely hey, listen, even in the NHL, I know that sports scientists and really like high level strength conditioning coaches and athletic therapists, they have to teach upper management why they're doing what they're doing sometimes, because they get heat about like, hey, like this guy's really slow. You need to make him faster. It's like, he's always been slow. He's not going to be that much like it doesn't necessarily work like that. So I think like that goes all the way up to the pro level, where it's like people who don't understand the concept of how to change the body and how to develop the speed, agility, all those things that we want to achieve. They don't understand the process of it. And I think that you just need, as a coach, you just need a little bit of, you got to make sure you understand why. If you aren't 100% sure about something, that's when you research or ask people or whatever. But I think if you have that in your back pocket, that's an easy conversation to have. And if the parent just won't have it and they just want to do it, then honestly, I've given them tough love and be like, you know what, you seem to have this under control. Why don't you just train your own kid? I don't have patience for, I don't have patience for people who are gonna, I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been, specializing in hockey for the last 8. Like, I've done my homework. Here's what I think, and here's why. If you don't agree with it, there's a lot of other options out there for you. So I don't mind, giving that feedback, because it is what it is.
You have quite a bit of experience, obviously, and it's well-rounded. So it's not like you've only been training hockey players, so that's all you know. Like you managed a CrossFit gym back in the day.
Yeah.
So you have CrossFit experience. You work at Lifetime Fitness.
Yeah.
And you trained with O'Brien, right?
Yep.
And so like you've seen it all, like what trainers are doing with kids playing hockey and certain movements. With your experience and people, like the people that you've worked with, do you think there's a bunch of foundational movements that work and that should be foundational that you don't see either any or a lot of trainers doing, just because they just lack that experience or don't understand the real goals that are trying to be achieved?
Yeah.
Or they're just trying to be lost by getting paid by the parents and making them happy?
Yeah, I mean, you got some good questions there. I think there's a little bit at the same time of like, think of yourself as a CrossFit athlete, for example, right? If I said, okay, you want to get better at Olympic lifting, and we only spend time working on your first pull, you're going to go crazy. You're going to hate it. So we do have to incorporate a little bit of fun and maybe something that what you picture, like, okay, let's actually lift now. And that's okay, as long as it's done in the right dose and with the right reason, right? So I think the same thing goes for sports. So particular movements, I think our primal patterns need to be good. And I think we need to me, especially from an injury if you can prevent injury, like non-contact injury, you are one of the best strength coaches out there. Injuries happen from the inability, or we don't have the capability to absorb forces that we're putting on our body. So for example, our body works in alternating mobility stability segments. Okay. Ankle is mobile. Knee should be stable. Hip should be mobile. Low back, lumbar area should be stable. Thoracic spine should be mobile. Shoulder girdle stable. Okay. Shoulder joint now mobile with stability from the girdle. Neck should be mobile. Elbow stable. Wrist mobile. If you aren't mobile where you're supposed to be mobile, and you're not stable where you need to be stable, something's going to give. So when we talk about foundation, it's like, do you have the capability to produce those motions? So can you rotate your thoracic spine or upper back without compensating, without your low back and hips rotating? If you can't, then to me, the foundation is, okay, that's a ability that you simply just don't have. And I think, and it's like, oh, you play hockey, that means you're taking contact. That means you have to absorb forces with rotation, or you have to decelerate or accelerate through that range in a slap shot. If you don't have the ability to rotate your upper back on your lumbar safely, you're going to hurt yourself at some point. There's going to be a jam. There's going to be a disc issue. There's going to be something along those lines. So to me, I think when you're young, foundational motions, I think, the primal movements and just playing in all three planes, we do in CrossFit, there's a lot sagittal. So 2 legs for the most part, straight forward and backwards, up and down. There's not in the traditional CrossFit method, there's not a lot side to side, and there's not a lot in rotation. So I think being able to just incorporate fun, especially for younger kids, like incorporating everything in those 3 planes is a great way to build a foundation, and that general athleticism to be able to kind of coordinate their body when they're young. The more they can move in the different planes, the better, because we get stuck when we stop moving. We know that. So if you can continuously train people in wide ranges of motion, then like to me, that's foundation. Keep training them in that, in every possible capacity. And if there's particular limitations, okay, address them, especially as they get older. But when they're young, to me, foundation is, okay, can you sit and stand? Can you step up onto something? Can you rotate can you throw a ball safely? Can you catch a ball safely? And just, to me, movement is the best foundation you could think of in a wide variety of planes. That's kind of my take on general foundation. As far as down the road, I think what you can start to specialize in, or being specific from a sports perspective, is teaching people what core strength actually means. I'll touch on this quickly so people kind of have a grasp, because I'm assuming most people here, either do CrossFit for exercise or some sort of activity for exercise. So when we're talking about core stability, a lot of people think 6-pack. Your core is this like canister essentially that goes all the way around. And if we and I think what a topic that I'm spending a lot more time with people on and getting really good at is, can you control that canister? Can you keep that can in the exact same position while other things are moving around it? The analogy I can use, from one of the certs I did, is if you can't create a strong canister, it's like trying to shoot a cannon out of a canoe. Okay, so if you think of your legs or your arms as your cannons, if they don't have something solid, if they're not grounded on something solid, they're not going to reach their potential, and probably are going to compensate somewhere. So I eventually start teaching, can you maintain that cylinder while you're doing other motions? A lot of people hyperextend their low back. So if you think of, let's say, a squat or a deadlift, a lot of people will tilt their pelvis forward, create extra arch in their low back. Now think of a can of Coke, for example. If you poke one side and dent it, it's way easier to crush. There's not a lot of stability there anymore. So if they hyperextend their low back and tilt their pelvis forward, well, that can is now compromised. And now the force production that you can, or the force transfer you can do to your limbs is limited, because it's coming from a very compromised, foundational support system. So to me, when we come, again, back to your question, are there things you need to see? To me, if they can control that cylinder through proper breathing patterns and understand how to create the right amount of pressure within it to hold that canister, I think that is something to build off of. And the earlier you can teach that, the better. And there's multiple ways of teaching it depending on the age and understanding and things like that. But I think, to me, like, if you don't have that as an athlete, I think you're missing out on a lot of things. So to me, I'd say that's a big piece.
There's some kids that or the parents are on right now that their kids play AAA or AA hockey right now. And, at a young age, do you think, you see the trend, like they'll play like one game a week, and they'll have like 3 practices or 2 practices, and they might do a dry land session with the team or a PT. Do you think that's just the standard, or do you think it's too much, or they should have like what's your opinion on it? Do you think like maybe they should be crushing their practices? It might be like, let's just focus on moving well during that practice as opposed to going hard. Like what's your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's up to the coach to be smart about, okay, if we have 2 games this week. Well, let's be smart about our volume or intensity during practices. Realistically, if they're playing AAA, you're going to want to practice a decent amount. So that's, to me, that's the norm. Like if you're going to play at that high level, that, okay, you're committed now. So yeah, you're going to spend time practicing, period. I think from an off ice perspective, I think people are still confused about how and when to incorporate that. I think a lot of people and coaches, it's not their fault. It's not their background on the off ice stuff. I think a lot of coaches and parents are like, oh, they have a day off, let's bag them in a workout. I'm sorry, but I think that's the wrong thing to do. To me, if they're in season and they're on the ice 5 to 6 times a week, I think they do 2, maybe 3 workouts a week, but at a much smaller time frame with very specific goals in mind. So to me, if you do 3 half-hour or 40-minute workouts at a 70% and focus on strength and positioning for the most part, not conditioning. They're on the ice 6 times a week. They don't really need a ton more conditioning at that point. Off season's a little bit different depending on their schedule, but in season, like to me, higher frequency, lower time and volume workouts to me are the key to success, because they'll continue to gain strength. They'll be able to stay balanced from a muscle perspective. And I think you're not going to overdo their nervous system. And if they have 1 full day off a week, give them the damn day off a week. Stop taking that time to be like, oh, you got nothing to do. Let's fill your time and let's go bag you in a workout or hill sprints. Like, no, like, yeah, your kids may have energy, but like their body does need some kind of recovery. If they want to go and kick a soccer ball around, fine. But like, if they're, don't take them through a big workout. So to me, like, I think that goes right up to the pro level. Like I've had some experience with 2 NHL teams and I've realized like and some, OHL and some, high level junior teams, and talk to their strength coaches and their sports scientists. And they're just like, yeah, we pick and choose when we go a little bit harder in our workouts, but the coach, the on ice coach knows like what that volume looks like. So their practice intensity will complement the intensity of the off ice stuff. So that has to be taken into consideration, and it just going hard all the time and not giving them days off, to me is a terrible idea.
Yeah, I think from a personal level, it's hard to tell. I think there becomes like a disconnection where it's like the parents like, okay, well, I'm going to pay you money to train my son, and son or daughter, and we try to tell them like, if possible, we prefer that they have at least 1 or 2 days off a week, and I'd rather you take them after practice and then bring them to us, because at least we can be more focused on, like you said, like getting them stronger, getting them movements, a lower intensity, because like you said, they're already being all conditioned as much as they need, and having 1 full day off is better than doing a half session. I'd rather double up and have a full day just for obviously recovery, but just having that mental break too. But I know that parents are like, well, I'm paying you money, and I associate my son rolling around dying and covered in sweat with, I got my money's worth, right? When you're slowing down movements and trying to get them to focus on that stability, being strong in certain ranges of motion, and obviously the intensity is going to be dropped down a bit, but we're going to be able to do some foundational, like real movements that they'll be able to benefit and get better like the next day because of that, right?
Yeah, I think that comes back to our job of educating the parents as well as the kids as here's what we plan to do over this season. Here's why. If anyone has a problem with it, please voice it, then we can talk about it. But realistically, I think people just need to understand, like, you need to, like, volume control is a thing. It's a real thing. So I think even at a relatively young age, they can handle a heck of a lot more, when they're younger, but at the same time, you don't want to, as a parent, you don't want to get stuck in the mentality of like, oh, if you're resting, you're lazy. That's not at all what it is. I worked with a pro baseball player this past off season, and believe me, if he wasn't training, he was doing 0 as much as possible. Like that was a higher priority for him than the training sessions to a certain degree. I'd say they're almost exactly the same. When he wasn't training, his main objective was to do as little as possible. And we trained 4 days a week, and that was it. So we do, whatever time that those training sessions was, he worked hard, but like that middle day, he might've done some active stuff, like a bike ride or something. but like the weekend or at night, like shut her down and do as little as possible. So right up to the pro level, like sometimes less is more for a lot of these guys. Like I've seen sprinters that they lift one every 10 days and that works for them. Yeah. So there isn't always a perfect science of like, oh, just work harder and that's it. So I think but it is our job to, I think, educate people based on your experience and your research that like, hey man, like parents understand my process. This is what our season is going to look like. If you have a team and you do 15 sessions during the off season, so once a week or maybe even twice a week, up to 20 sessions over the off season, explain how you're going to cycle through. And I think it's important to decide with the coach, like, all right, what's an ideal schedule here? And then go from there. Yeah, I'd say that's my answer to that one.
Do any of you parents have any questions that, you want to ask Jason? I'm sure you guys have kids in high level sports and want to know, best practices or what, if you want to ask them, what you guys are doing with your kids, if you guys are on the ball and, helping your kids with the right, path of success. Brett, I'm talking to you. Brett, where are you?
So I actually have a pretty good story regardless. So I have an example of it. I have a client, real estate agent, nice guy. He has an older son and a younger daughter. So the daughter's, I think, 3 or 4 years younger than the son. The son's now 10. So the daughter's about 7. He admitted to me, and he was the guy that I mentioned at the beginning of this that moved houses to get his kid in a better development. So his older son at 9 or 10 years old. So and he coaches, like he's dedicated, he's all in, but he's a big hockey guy. Like he's always been a fan, the stuff like that. So he's just like, I got my son. He's really good. He's at a high level for his age group. So it's like, yeah, let's go. And he said to me, he asked me my opinion on, hey, what about my daughter? She's actually really good. But he's like, I feel like I'm not giving her the resources I'm giving my son, simply because, and his reason was, and he's not wrong, but I think we had to change his mindset a little bit. He's like, I'm not giving my daughter the same resources because there's no pro women's that pays. And it's like, so why get so good at hockey, like at a sport for a female, if there's no real like NHL or pro level, even though there's the WNHL, like for example, the Canadian Women's Hockey League, CWHL Pro folded. We're hoping it comes back, but he's like, so what's your take? Like, should I be, my son's on the ice. I set up private sessions for him. I do all these things, and my daughter's on the ice like once a week, maybe twice. And I'm doing that on purpose because I don't see the future for her in this sport. And I said, well, to me, so for example, a little bit of background on me, my wife played university hockey for 5 years at McGill University. And to me, I told him, I was like, listen, man, like your daughter can get a full ride to an amazing college if she's good at a sport. So first of all, if you're just looking at it from a monetary standpoint or from a career standpoint, I think you're looking at it from a wrong angle. I think you have to understand what else goes along with the process of becoming good at something. And I think, what I explained to him was like, first of all, if you don't let her pursue this and I'm not sure what other, options that she had from a hobby perspective, but I think like by taking them away or not giving that opportunity, first of all, you're showing a little bit of, sibling like discrimination to a certain degree. That's number one. Number two, I think the social development that kids get from playing sports and is incredible. So I'm like, okay, that's massive. Number three, the understanding a process to be good at something, I think our younger generation doesn't have, or to a certain degree, maybe I'm biased at it, but I feel like people want things instantly. And I think that's just the nature of our society where like we can snap our fingers and get what we want. So I think if it's just like, hey, if you work hard, you can achieve something great. Just that mentality can go a long way for them. And then I told him, like, listen, if your daughter managed to be good enough and play at a relatively high level school because of hockey, what she comes out of that with is friendships for life. My wife still is best friends with her entire team that she played with in university. So number one. Number two, the experience that you might get from getting a high level education with very intelligent people that you're surrounded with that understand the process of athletics as well as academics, like you're building a model citizen that has a amazingly bright future. So I just found, I was so taken back by the original question. That's like, man, there's so much more than making it to the NHL that is so great about sports and, you know, putting in work to be good at it. And I don't know, it was just an interesting, I feel like anyone, especially with a daughter, I think that story kind of like would hit home a little bit. And I'm just like, I don't know if anyone else thinks that, but he can't be the only one thinking that. And I was like, I was happy to be able to think about it myself for a second and then shed some light on my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, you know, I talk about it too. And the principles, and we talk about it on all the calls all the time, the principles of success don't change, right? At a young age in sport, when this is your goal, what do I have to do? I got to pick my goal. I got to find my weaknesses. I got to find the best way to achieve it in a timely fashion. And obviously that's going to take a lot of effort to do that. And then hopefully I reach my goal, and then you do it again and you do it again and you do it again. And as we get older, the goals are no longer sport. They're going to be, you know, could be financial. They could be, you know, career goals. You know, it could be relationship goals. And it's the exact same principles. And our kids aren't going to get jobs at 8 years old, especially these days. They're going to come out, their first jobs, they're going to be like 25 when they get their first jobs, the way it works out now. So they're going to have no idea how to actually, you know, think for themselves and think in a analytical, proper way on how am I going to do something and how am I going to get uncomfortable. And I'm going to realize I'm not going to get it that easy. So I'm going to have to, you know, adjust my goals or adjust the way I'm doing things, because it's never that easy. Right. So I think,
yeah,
it's so important.
Yeah, you're right. I honestly, to me, it comes back to a little bit to the social side. How we operate, we are a sum of the people we surround ourselves with, right? Everybody knows that. So if you can surround yourself with hardworking people and dedicated people and let's say using a sport for that, like you are the sum of this, you know, this general type of person that's hardworking, is easy to get along with. You learn how to work with other people, and like what else, regardless of what you do in life, you need all those skills. So, okay, whether you use the sport as your career or you use it to create an amazing career in whatever else you're interested in, like, to me, it's a win-win. So whether, like, you know, the way I'm able to work with people and I enjoy being around people allows me to do what I do well, because I grew up in so many different teams across different sports. And it wasn't, the sport had nothing to do with it. Is the fact that we just worked together and like found a way to make it work. You know what I mean? And I think to me, that's building a model citizen, in my opinion.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So my daughter's in gymnastics. And you mentioned earlier about exposing kids to a lot of sports. And that's something I've always struggled with a bit, because I find now they force you to specialize your kids so young, like compared to when I grew up.
Yeah.
So there's just not enough hours in the day. So I sometimes worry about her missing out on those things. She loves gymnastics and she's super happy there, but she's there like 16 hours a week. So there's really not like a lot of room for much else. And she's not going to become an Olympian, but just wondering if you have any suggestions, or if you've noticed that they, like, I know some of it's money driven, but like they're really forcing parents to choose if they want to go anything past recreational to kind of specialize really young.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's that goes across most sports, but I think especially, you know what, to me, especially something like gymnastics, to be specific to your question, I think I almost kind of kicked myself for not liking gymnastics when I was younger. Like, to me, like, she's going to learn how to be a great mover. She's in a team, even though it's a relatively individual activity, depending on the routines. But like, in the end, she's part of a team. She understands process. And if she likes it and wants to challenge herself, and the nature of it is that they need to dedicate X amount of time, then I think like that's a good call for you. Like, I think, yeah, to me, like, yeah, it's great it's great. But I think at the same time, when she's at home, you know, she's in the backyard, wants to kick a soccer ball around, like that's development to me anyway. Right. So she doesn't have to do everything competitively, but if gymnastics is her thing, like, all right, like, I think you need to support that. And if she likes it, and if she wants to go for rep, or she, like, you gotta, I don't know, how old's your daughter?
She's 8.
Okay. So I think at that, as young as that is, at that age, they have an idea of like, yeah, I want to go rep. Like, I want to prove myself. I want to, all right, I don't think it's our job to stop them. I think it's our job to support them. And if that's what they like to do, like, to me, that's it. Like, and realistically, if she wants to practice gymnastics at a later age, you know, carry it into, who knows, maybe, you know, NCAA level, something like that down the road. Like, she is going to have to specialize at 8 years old. Yeah, they got to be pretty good at it, and they got to like spend some time on it. So, you know, when I was young, I wanted to play rep hockey. My parents were like, all right, well, it's going to be more time, but yeah, I'm like, okay. So I think you support her with it. And if she starts to not like it, all right, well, that's it. So I think it's just I think it is the nature of the beast, and we have to kind of work with it a little bit, especially in areas. I know gymnastics is, you know, similar to hockey in the sense it's like you have to spend a lot of time, and that's just like the thing. And if you're not doing it right from a young age, like, you're missing the boat. But if, again, the best thing you said in your question was that your daughter loves it, and I'm just like, well, I think you just answered.
Yeah. No, and I feel good about the decision. It's just sometimes hard because when they're that young, you really make a lot of decisions for them, like, because they say they love it, but they haven't experienced the other thing, right? So they're kind of comparing. But ultimately, she's happy, so I'm happy with our decision. But I do find it's like, in the back of my head, I'm always like, well, I haven't really given her exposure to certain other things. So you kind of.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, you got to pick your battles a little bit. I think it gets to a point where you're like, well, you can't expose them to everything. So you don't really know. It's like, hey, maybe my kid wants to be an artist. Well, if they don't feel like drawing right now, it's like, well, then it's not going to, you know what I mean? Like, I think don't overthink it. Like, don't beat yourself up over the fact that, like, maybe they're missing out on some trial and error on some things.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know. I've talked to other parents, and they have their kid, let's say, in mainly one activity. So let's say gymnastics, and they dabble in some like house league soccer, and they see what happens. If the kid hates it, okay, done with that. And they just kind of like pick and choose. I mean, you got to go with what makes the most sense. You can only work with what you don't know, right? So I think realistically, you kind of work with the information at hand. But I think you're even just you being cautious about it will go a long way to making sure that she's actually doing this for the right reasons.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, of course.
I know, like, my son's only 4.5, and I'm already struggling with it, where it's like, I have all these things lined up in my brain that he's got to do. I'm like, but you're going to get caught down this rabbit hole. You're like, what if it's just hockey? And don't get me wrong, I like hockey and I want to play hockey, but it's like, he's in hockey. He was in hockey until this happened. Yeah. He was in swimming. And then he's got, like, this summer he was going to have soccer. And then I had to get him, I was going to sign him up once a week where he's in these hockey school, right? But I'm like, but I still want him to get into martial arts. So I'm like, how is this going to fit? And I'm like, when's he going to take it? Is there going to be time? Like, you get stressed because, like, I don't want him to lose out any other opportunities, but maybe he wants to play another sport. Like, and then you realize, like, if he just likes hockey, then he might be like your daughter, Anita, where it's like, it might just be hockey because you only have so much time, you only have so much money, and you can only do so much for the child. And it's like, but what if he's missing out on something he could be amazing at, or that he really knew, but I didn't give him the opportunity? But then it's like, it's like paralysis of analysis. It's like, at the end of the day, you mean well, and we can only do so much. And I think maybe doing too much, I sound like a psycho parent, but like doing too much is going to be just as bad as not doing enough. Right. And, that's the whole parenting balance. And the more we know, like, say you talk to us, you're like, shit, maybe I need to do this now. Maybe I need to do that. Like, and knowing too much is just as bad as not knowing enough either. So
and Chris, you know where that goes? You know where that leads to? It's the fact that sometimes, because I know we're in the same boat, right? We have one kid who plays hockey, another one who does gymnastics and karate, another one who does karate. And I always used to think like the same thing. We want them to be exposed to so much. But we also know the flip side of that is that having kids in too many organized sports, number one, these kids don't know what to do when they have a half an hour of spare time. They're bored, right? They forget how to play. They forget how to just sit and chill and relax. And the other thing is that they also, you have to keep in mind that these kids need time to be with their friends. And, Pierce has missed a lot of birthday parties because he's got a hockey game or a hockey practice. And so balancing that becomes just as important, because now that they're a little bit older, my kids, I'm starting to see that, right? When they're little and you don't have those other social interactions, it's like, okay, it's fine that he has hockey 4 times a week, but when he starts to miss out on other things that are socially like extremely important at their age, then you go, oh, okay, maybe I need to back down a little bit, give them a little bit of that freedom and that space and just time to be creative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Keep in mind though that every time, especially if they're playing a team sport, I realize it's a completely different situation, but at the same time, those, and I'm not saying first of all, I'm agreeing with you. I think just keep in mind though that those practices and those games are social activities. They're not birthday parties, so a little bit obviously different kind of fun. That being said, it's not. And the friends that they're creating are the hockey players that they're around. So yeah, I mean, again, there's no right or wrong here. I'm just kicking around. Just don't beat yourself up if like, oh, they are missing certain events, but don't forget they're still getting something out of it. So I just want to kind of put that out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's true. His hockey friends are some of his closest friends. And there's, and of course there's the component of, look, you did commit to a team now. So yeah, part of that is going to be missing out on some things because you made a commitment and the team relies on you, right?
Great life lesson.
At the end of the day, yeah, it's all about balance, right? It's just trying to maintain balance, especially when you have more than one kid after. It's like, oh,
yeah.
Very
I bow to the parents with multiple kids in variety of sports because I'm not there yet, and but I see it, and I'm just like, yeah, you're an Uber driver as your second job. So it's impressive what you guys do, and I think what it comes down to is, Chris, first of all, you don't know what you don't know. So when you're worried about not exposing them, it's like it's okay. And I think just by watching your kid develop and move and whatever, I think you'll know what type of activity they're gonna be good at and what they might, but it comes down to no matter what, it's what they like. I've talked to people who quit sports at 13, 14 because they're just over it. They just hated it. Their parents were like, do this, because they played it. And they're just like, I don't like this. I talked to pro hockey players. I'm like, what do you guys think about this development? Like, I remember I had an NHL player come in after a season. They didn't make playoffs. So they finished in, beginning of April, beginning of May, he strolls in the gym just to say hi. He wasn't planning on starting anytime soon. He was chilling out for probably 6-7 weeks after season. And I had a group of young kids in, so midget AAA, so they were high level, so 16 years old, high level. And the pro player was like, who are these kids? And I was like, oh, they're AAA players. So I'm like, they're on their second phase of their off season. He's like, what? He's like, when did they start? I'm like, March. He says, those kids are going to hate hockey by the time they're 20. He's just like, he was blown away. Now, that being said, he is a 10-year NHL vet, so times have changed a little bit. But I think the idea of like, I think sometimes sometimes too much can definitely be a factor there. And all of this to say, I think it comes back to they just got to have fun. They got to enjoy it. And if they're doing that, to me, you're succeeding as a parent. If they're developing around people that they get along with and it's a positive influence on them, they're staying active, they're staying healthy, and they're having fun. Like, I don't know what else you can do as a parent. So to me, those are like, there's a quote that I love that uncoachable parents develop uncoachable kids. And I think the parents we need to just be like, yeah, let's think about the main principles of why we're doing this. And then, put that kind of values towards our kids. And I think you're going to make some pretty outstanding individuals later on.
Brett, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, like, to Doriana, that like my kid right now, he's 10, plays AAA hockey. And it's hard right now because of what we're doing. He's been off the ice the longest he's ever been off the ice right now. And, but he's still being social. Like, he's on Fortnite every day. The whole hockey team's on there. Like, he's basically playing with the whole hockey team every day. So he's being social that way. Yeah, he does miss birthday parties, that kind of stuff. He understands, though, like, if he has hockey, he doesn't go to a birthday party. But everybody on the team understands that. But the thing I have for Jason is, like, yeah, this is the longest he's been off the ice. Mm-hmm. I usually keep him off the ice 6 to 8 weeks through the summer. Like, we're usually on the ice at least until the end of June. Mm-hmm. And then he's off for July and most of August. So we'll get back usually the end of August.
Yeah.
He does go to a sports camp. So he plays all of the other sports, basically everything where you can count. He does that. But now he might be missing some of that stuff and being off the ice for so long. The coach sent us some workouts for him to do like every day.
Yeah.
But the capacity of those workouts are like, I can't even do them. Like I'm modifying them for him. Like I just think the coach went a little bit overboard on some of the work.
Yeah.
But what do you think he should be doing? Is there anything he should be doing like to keep up his hockey stuff? Like,
yeah, I mean, to me, like, so I work with a few guys virtually right now from the NHL level down to midget AAA. And even at that level, I think there needs to be a little bit of balance. Even our NHL guys play Fortnite, so that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's usually with other hockey players, so that's pretty cool. But I think from a active, sports specific type thing, like I got a couple kids that I recommend. Like I'm not a skills expert, but I have a network of people who are good with that. So I'll say, hey, why don't you spend 30 minutes every other day or 20 minutes every other day on some stick handling drills. And then the opposite days, you'll do a workout. And then I think it'd just be intelligent. Like if the coach went overboard, like Brett, you've probably been around Chris long enough. You have an idea of what volume looks like and, keep that in check a little bit. So maybe cut a set out or whatever it might be, or maybe tone down some of the intensity or build it up over time. But I think like a little bit of mix and match can go a long way for them. I think keeping the stick in their hand at least 3 times a week in some capacity, stick handling, if you have a space for them to shoot, great. I wouldn't, maybe not 1,000 shots a day because their shoulders won't be able to deal and they'll develop some pain or potentially. But I think definitely keeping the stick in their hand, especially again, if he's a high level hockey player, you're probably going to want to do that a little bit. I don't think you need to put like a ton of emphasis on it. I think maybe suggest it, and you don't have to set up a schedule for your son. I think it might just be a good idea to, maybe you go and, pass around with them, take some shots, or have them do some, do some deflections. I don't know, have some fun with it with the stick in his hand. And as far as workouts go, just make sure he's active. I think that's more than anything. Go play stuff, or if you can, or if he does want to do these workouts, I think like just be careful with the volume, obviously.
Yeah, so we've been doing that about half an hour each day, like either doing the workout or like yesterday we played in the basement, some soccer, some lacrosse.
Cool.
Like rainy, right? When it's not raining, we've been skating. We've been going for a rollerblade about half an hour every day if he wants to. So like that's pretty much all we've been doing. The other on the weekend when it was nice, we played hockey on the street. And
sweet. I mean, to me that sounds awesome. If you want to get a little more specific, like you can message me and I'll point you in a direct, like if you want to do some stick handling drills, like I got some good friends that's what they do is teach, they work for the NHL and they teach off ice stick handling and stuff like that. Like obviously during quarantine, they're doing some different drills. So if you want something a little more specific, sure. But I think it sounds like your plan is bang on, Brett.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Cause I just see like all those like Instagram videos, of all these guys doing their stick handling and like all these hockey schools, like offering like online virtual training and every day. And to me, I don't think my kid needs that right now. Like I think he just needs like a half an hour being active every day. He's pretty active anyways. I think just this whole Corona thing like has sort of put us in a different state of mind. And he wants to talk to his friends, he doesn't get to see his friends, so it's a little bit different mindset right now. So he's not being as active as he usually is.
That's fair. I mean, I don't think realistically, like as much as it is out there online, I don't think anyone's as active as they normally would, especially if they're active people. So I think, you can see like knowing your son and just talk to him, be like, hey, here's an option. Someone offers $5 a session to do these virtual stick handling sessions a couple times a week. Do you want to hop in on one or two? If he says no, well, there's a good answer. If he's into it, well, maybe that's a cool option. So it's, but I don't know, man. He's not going to forget how to play hockey by the time he steps back on the ice. So I think if you keep the stick in his hand a little bit, go for rollerblades, I think you're doing the right thing.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Awesome, guys. We're an hour and 10 minutes in. It's like one of the longest talks we've done. I got to jump in on a Zoom call in about 5 minutes as well.
Cool.
So I'm going to have to cut this. Definitely not short, but I'm going to definitely have to end this. But honestly, Jay, I just want to thank you for, giving up your time, right? You answered a lot of questions. I'm going to not feel so bad and guilty being up here and trying to do everything to my 4.5-year-old son. But, these are things that I'm sure we all struggle with and want to know that, are we doing, what's best for our child? Are they actually happy? Or are we just, thinking about ourselves too much when dealing with them. So, again, thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll have you again, and we'll post this on the email list tomorrow, guys, and I'll put his contact if you guys have any questions for him.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot for having me. Hope to do it again. But yeah, don't be shy if anyone has any questions. Again, it's my opinion, it's my 2 cents, but so take it for what it is. But thanks a lot.
Thanks again.
All right, guys.
See you later, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Jay.
You got it.